Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Cohen, and I'm really pleased to introduce our next guest, Peng Roden Her. Peng is a medical intuitive, a licensed acupuncturist, and a Qigong master. And really glad you're here, Peng. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Matthew. It's great to be on.
So, first thing I wanted to ask you is for those that don't know about what a medical intuitive is, can you give us a brief explanation of that first?
Okay. So first, I didn't even know what I was doing. So a medical intuitive is someone who can look at somebody and see where there are energetic blocks along the body. And I used this when I was going to acupuncture school. I was seeing this from students. It really opened up in acupuncture school. I was seeing it from students, classmates, and eventually I I held Qigong lectures on it where I brought people up to the front and I read them in front of everybody, uh, just random people. And that's how I started my living. And so the ability to look into the body and peer and see where there are blocks and obstructions, and then in combination of using the acupuncture to help release those blocks. Um, all of that came about through the practice of Qigong as a side effect.
Yeah, cool. One more around that because I find it really interesting, and it's a point on the map for me. So some intuitives see, and some intuitives, as you said, see chi or blockages. Some hear,
Yeah.
and some feel, and
Yeah.
some information from uh, embodied beings, teachers, and some from those that aren't embodied. So I know this is a fairly maybe new for some people, but I wanted to ask you personally because I'm always curious. When you started to practice and your innate skills or gifts started to augment and you started to see, um, did you also hear or feel? And I'm just
So,
curious.
no, this is very good. So when we talk about see, see is a word that I use to point at the concept in which I sense energy. So see is just the pointing word. Um, so imagine you putting your hand into a bucket, and it's just there's a hole about the size of your forearm, your arm. And as you shift your hole and you shift your hand into the hole and you reach around, there's items in the box. As you're touching those items, your brain is producing those images as through a sense of touch. And so what I see seeing is the sense of touching something without looking at it. And in the mind or the energy is really touching it, more so to say, the energy is touching it. And as the energy is touching it, I'm getting images in my mind, in the realm of my consciousness. Oh, this is hard. This is small, circular. This is warm. You can produce, there's a sensation that is felt. So what you're not you're really using, what I'm not, well, so it's not really my physical eyes seeing, it is the seeing in the mind. And so that's how I see energy. It's from that sense, to be more specific.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, I have another question for you around um, when you started to practice Qigong and things started to open up. Um, was it again a feeling tone for you? Because it really feels like there's a sense of feeling with you, like a tone. I'm just curious about that.
Yes. So there is a tone, hmm, it's like a low volume humming. And for those who are sensitive to energy, like even if they're watching my screen right now, if they can either see my aura shift, or they can hear a low humming, or they can feel my energy expand. And so everybody will be different. Some people will feel through the sense of feeling, and then will produce images in the mind. I can be more more clairsentience. Some people will see with their physical eyes. They will see with their physical eyes. They'll see colors. They'll see auras. They'll see things getting brighter. They'll see dark spots in the body. Some people will hear pitches and tones. And so when they're looking at, so I have a friend. She's a retired nurse. She learned acupuncture, practiced acupuncture, teaches Qigong, Tai Chi. And every time I'm around her, she's just like, hey, she's too loud. And like, I'm not trying to, this is just me walking around being normal. So I always have to try to like dial it down. But she can hear either a high pitch, almost kind of like a tinnitus. This is what she's describing to me, if I can recall it correctly. It's either a high pitch or it's like a low tone. And when she's looking at parts of the body, she can hear those tones and frequencies in the body shift. So it's very fascinating to run into other people who can either hear or see with their physical eyes, but I sense and I see in my mind. Images are produced in my mind.
That's great. I just wanted to start with that as a departure point because
Yeah.
I tend to feel, and when you and I sat for a moment as we connected, I felt your field, I suppose, and our connection point as we got into resonance before we started this discussion. And I always find it fascinating how people get connected and how the practice, often for me, when I started practicing Qigong, many senses opened up and it augmented my energy. I was started out as a martial artist because I wanted to heal my back. And then other things opened up. And, oh, what's that? That led me into acupuncture and like many of us into other practices. And I found that the doorway in, so to speak, that unlocked things was Qigong. And that's what I'm hearing from you. And I wanted to ask you also, uh, what are a couple of things, two or three things that you would have, uh, that you wish you knew when you started Qigong and that the practice has offered you?
Yeah, the first thing, the three things I wish I knew before starting Qigong was that Qi is the essence of the Qigong practice. And so when you're learning like 30 different sets, 30 different forms, and you're practicing, and it takes about 2 hours, 3 hours to practice, we just don't have that kind of time these days and unless you live the temple life, we just don't have that kind of time these days to dedicate that much effort into learning all of these choreographed forms. And so what I found was that it became too daunting of a task, and I just cut out all the fat. And I said, what does everybody agree on? Well, everybody agrees on this. What do all the great masters practice? Well, all these masters practice this. So and so has this flair, so and so has this flair, so and so has this flair. It's because that's what makes them unique. But their foundation is the same. So I stopped practicing all of these branched off versions where the master themselves. I studied the foundation. Once I studied the foundation, and I looked at all the different sets from Shaolin, from Wudang, from the family systems, I just said, all right, how can I boil this down? And I boiled it down, made it very simple. And then I started practicing that. And at the same time, if I can throw in a little, uh, most of my teachers weren't physical. Most of my teachers came to me in the dream state and they said, here's what you need to work on, practice this, and you'll get it. I'd practice in a dream state. I'd wake up, I'd have it. And then I would start practicing it and fine tuning it. So the first thing is Qi is the essence of Qigong. And so try not to get lost by studying thousands of forms because there's many, many, many Qigong systems and many sets. And finding that Qi is the essence. And the idea is to discover the Qi. So that's the first thing I wish I knew. The second thing I wished I knew was Qigong is a spiritual practice. Now, innately, I knew, um, but a lot of like yoga and everything else, Qigong is being promoted as for health. And now health is a side effect of you pursuing your spiritual path. And so as you practice these practices, you're opening up the blocks, you're removing the blocks, and you're also becoming more intuitive. You're becoming more connected to your higher self, more the divine self. And as you become more connected to the divine self, that's where intuition, self-knowing, and then health is just a side effect of it. Yeah. And also the intuitive stuff is all a side effect of it. So the thing is, people are practicing these practices, searching to become more intuitive and becoming more psychic. And no, that's you're going at it wrong. Um, you have to practice it for the sake of um, yeah, opening things up, and then the intuitive stuff just comes as a side effect. In fact, the intuition, I tell this to people, all my students, is that the intuition stuff, the intuition is a side effect of how far along you've come along the way in your own spiritual practice, how much personal growth you've had, how much spiritual practice you've had, and the intuition is just a side effect of it. So, and as long as you continue, Qigong is a spiritual path. So that's number two. And number three, sorry, that's number two. Number three is finding a teacher who is willing to talk about Qigong practice as how it may lead to a spiritual awakening, how it may lead to your spiritual awakening, and also to finding a teacher who will talk about all the mental changes, personality changes, emotional disorders, and all the in Qigong we say is Qigong psychosis, right? And so this isn't talked about much in Qigong, and so it's just like the book I bought again went to acupuncture school, TCM psychology, right? At the end, there's like a small little 5-page. It's like a chapter which is like 5 pages that talks about Qigong psychosis, meaning improper practice of Qigong. Now, I'm not sure now where I stand now. I'm looking at it, and I don't think it's from improper practice. I think it's from uh, the not having access to Chinese medicine to help remove these blocks. Because I think you must marry. It's just this is my personal opinion. Take it or leave it. I believe that if you want to get high at the furthest levels of Qigong practice, you must marry and merge acupuncture and Qigong. Because the acupuncture, anytime you practice, any obstructions or are traumas, emotions, trapped emotions, resentment, anger, fear. These emotions that came from our childhood, came from this life, came from past life, came from ancestral. These wounds are deeply held within the body in our genetic code. And so when we practice Qigong, we are opening up the blocks, opening up the channels, opening up the reservoirs, and also freeing up these traumas from the body to be released. Because the purpose of these spiritual practices is to evolve the body, evolve the soul through the body. And so finding a teacher. So number three is finding a teacher who is willing to discuss what may change and has an understanding as to how improper practices are over practicing or not practicing enough, or when you reach an obstruction. Hey, you're getting to this point where you're reaching this obstruction where you're going to meet yourself, right? There's a wounded identity within you that you're going to meet, and that wounded identity within you is going to magnify. And so there has to be a way that you can recognize these signs and symptoms and then learn how to pluck these out in order to not have. There's going to be cognitive dissonance along any spiritual path, but because this topic is so taboo, and I couldn't find anybody who was talking about it because nobody talked about it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to, man, that's great. I'm going to do a little recap. So the things you wish you'd known when you started Qigong, one, it's about Qi. So
About Qi.
The animating force for those that there's so many definitions of Qi, but from this context, the animating force, yes.
Yes.
Two, it's a spiritual practice, and that it's about elevating consciousness for the individual. And three, to find a teacher who will talk about this stuff and be able to guide you through the steps and stages. And in particular, I want to go back to a couple of things you said. One is you feel it's a spiritual practice, and to get to the highest levels, it has to be done, or you feel it's best done with acupuncture. Do you mean literally needles or gua sha, butt cupping, qigong, mind work, the whole totality of, say, okay, cool. Um,
The whole totality.
yeah, I agree. Just wanted to clarify that. Um, the other thing is for maybe those that aren't quite as familiar with this, when one starts to practice and their energy augments, let's just say, becomes more powerful. If they have a underlying condition of, say, they're very stubborn or they're very willful, or they might have what one might call a pathology of being an overachiever, could give it any type of definition, and they don't have a teacher that can guide them through these steps, then they're going to put a lot of fuel onto that potential pathology and it will become exaggerated, at least in my experience. So, if this is similar to what you're saying, can you speak on that a little bit? Because I think it's a very interesting thing. Studying martial arts, there were times when students would get tiger eye and they would go into essentially a psychotic state and get very frozen in their dynamic. And it was very hard for them to then go out into the everyday world. They went from sort of a secular to a sacred or deep place, and then they couldn't reintegrate. And oftentimes I would see when I was young, they would have to be sent to different teachers. There were very few, as you say, that would actually address this issue. And then they would regulate and harmonize and integrate and be helped very quickly. So if this is something you could speak on, I think it's a very interesting point that you brought up, and we might as well talk about it now since we have the time.
Yeah, let's do it. Um, yeah, when you're just just along the soul's path to being here on this planet, um, actually it's the soul's path to healing. And so as we begin to train these, if we train these hard styles, we have hard Qigong, then we have to have a soft Qigong in order to have a Yang and a Yin. If you have a soft Qigong, you have to have a start. Then it would be recommended that you have something physical in order to contain the energy. So you can't push Qi through the vessel. The physical vessel can only contain a certain amount of Qi. And so strength training, cardio training, proper nutrition, proper mindset also allows for the Qi to flow. And I hope I'm answering your question. And as the Qi begins to pour through the body, through these practices, yes, it magnifies all of these character flaws within us. It magnifies the good ones. It also magnifies the bad ones. And so this isn't discussed. This isn't just from my experience. It hasn't been discussed until, I don't know, I've been figuring out for myself through my own mistakes, trial and error, like everybody. And what I found was that there were certain wounded identities within me that falls into victim consciousness, that falls into victim mentality that were magnified. And that hurt a lot of people around me because including myself. And so most of these ideas are unconscious. These belief systems are unconscious, and we don't even know that we're operating through these unconscious belief systems. And so these unconscious belief systems will be magnified, and you will operate and create that reality. So it is. I hope I'm answering your question. So am I
Yes,
going?
no, I think you are. I'm following you. To me, it's also, and I think that it's in a sense, almost Jungian, right? They're archetypes that we find. If the audience is familiar with Carl Jung, and there are different archetypes: the warrior, the healer, the visionary, etc. Some positive, and some might be looked at as maybe not so positive. And yeah, when you get a lot of energy, it can feed those things, and it takes a teacher who can walk you through that. Because I heard you say that some people around you, including yourself, got affected by it. I know when I started to practice, just to make it really simple, it was essentially ego. I know the wounded part of me that was a child, but I'll just say for the now, not getting too deep into it, it was ego. So my ego got very big, and then of course I had to crash. It's like a hollow inside, stronger outside, and I think this happens with a lot of people. So I'm glad you're addressing it, because in the yogic tradition and qigong practices, also people will have as you said, gifts come. You didn't say it in the word gifts, but like intuition. I think you used the word.
Hmm.
And a lot of people will have intuition or sight or start to get psychic abilities, and they'll hang on to that as a prize and get lost along the way. When in India, the practice in yoga, they call it siddhis, the essentially purifications, and the instruction is always to give them back, so to speak. Metaphorically, like, okay, it's something that comes along with it. But I think that having a guide, having a teacher that can help the students through these stages, so that if they start to amplify some of their core wounds, so to speak, that they can have guidance through that. What would be, for those at home, maybe a simple practice you could share or talk about if someone starts to feel like they're getting a little bit wrapped around the axle, so to speak, they're having distortion of energy, um, maybe they're not thinking clearly or feeling harmonized. What might you offer them as a touchstone or guidepost?
Physical movement. First thing is going to be physical movement. So walking is not enough. We have to start shifting into jogging. So jogging will help you disperse that energy. And jogging is very like Tai Chi, yin yang. So jogging will get that energy to disperse. It's kind of like I'm a fan of the dog whisperer, right? And so every time he has these chaotic dogs, what does he do? He takes them on walks. And once that they walk, they go for a walk and they get all that energy out of them, they're more calm. Well, we're not that different. We're the same. So as you practice Qigong, you begin to build this energy. Your energetic field went from here to now here. And now you amplified and magnified everything within that magnetic field, or your energetic field. And so to disperse that energy, there has to be physical movement. So jogging, walking's not enough. You must jog or run. That'll help disperse that extra energy from the body. Also, squats or mabu or horse stance or standing post. All these stances shift out of sitting meditation and shift into standing meditation. This way, the energy will go from the dantian down the feet and root into the earth. All this extra energy will leave and dissipate from the body. We don't want to overcharge the body. This was one of the things that I did in martial Qigong. This is when I was learning like iron palm, iron shin, things like this. So I'm, bashing every day, poking into, um, beans all day, every day. And it was crazy. It was awesome, but I also found that I had a bit of a psychosis, meaning I'm walking around and I'm looking to see. I remember walking in college when I was doing all this iron palm stuff. I was walking in college, walking through the hallways, and I was waiting to see if so and so attacked me, I would do this. And I kept doing that. And I was like, that's mental. I need to stop. And so I had to check myself and then stop the thoughts and recognize that, first of all, I was going into hyper defense mode. I was being hyper vigilant, and I was using, because that's what you're training the energy to do. And so when you're training the body and energy to do that, unconsciously, you're going to walk around with those lenses, like you said, tiger eye, right? And so, knowing those things now, walking, jogging will help disperse. Going out in nature will help disperse this excess energy and get these thought forms or ideas out of you to disperse. So jogging is a big one, and also the diet's going to be a big thing. Recently, I've been shifting over towards leaning towards a more pescatarian diet, not by choice. That's my body's choice, not my choice. My choice is different. I love tasty food. Love pizza, Chicago pizza, deep dish. But my body disagrees with it. So I bend to the will of the body. So I hope I'm answering your question. I'm going off on tangents here, but
No, you are. I think that's there's a lot there. I was laughing quietly to myself because it seems like we have a similar history there. But I did a lot of Shaolin and Iron Palm training, and similar to you, as a young man, it's like wanting to road test something or being hyper vigilant. It brings the sympathetic nervous system up, and then what do I do with that? Um, for the audience, arm palm is a training method where you strike a bag with broken pieces of tire or mung beans or eventually pieces of BBs or, various things. You strike a pad or put your fingers into metal shavings, and you make the hand very strong so that you can use it for self-defense. But sometimes, again, sometimes young men and young people get invested in the ego, and it can bring up a lot. So it's good that you can then dissipate the energy by standing, letting energy move through Yong Chuen through the feet, or jogging, or running, or shaking, or diet,
Mhm.
all of those things. I think also something I'm hearing from you a lot in this conversation, feeling, is the idea in Chinese practices of Ting, of listening energy, this idea, listening with the whole being. So you like deep dish pizza, but your body at a certain point, for me, with this white, along my face, at some point I said, well, maybe I can't eat that stuff anymore, because as much as I want to eat it, when I do, it doesn't feel this good. Um, I will have a scotch every once in a while, but if I do anything in excess now, or even have two glasses of wine, my body can't handle it the way I used to. And even though one might say, well, as you get healthier, you can handle more, but we have to listen to where our body's at. So you're listening, and listening to the dreams that came, listening to your body as it shifts, and being able to adjust accordingly. And this is, to me, wisdom. I wanted to see if you could share a little bit about that idea, or your experience, really, not necessarily the idea, but how to listen. I think there are
Mm.
many ways to listen, and you're clearly listening. So for those that are learning to listen with more than just their ears, maybe you could share some of your experience.
Yes. The I've been teacherless all this time. Physical teacherless. I've met different masters. I've learned from different instructors, but the teacher is right here. When I taste Before I taste tea, I touch it. I can feel what it's doing to my body. Uh, so, for example, anything that you can we are beings of frequency and energy. As energy comes through, when you're practicing qigong, energy is a energy practice and a frequency practice, but it's more so for qigong. Is more so a um, if I were to compare, yoga is more of a frequency practice, more yin. Qigong is more of a yang practice, more energy. And so when you practice, you're pulling all this energy into the body. It magnifies everything. And what I noticed was that when it first started, first started noticing these signs. I noticed that when I ate pork, I started getting phlegmy in the sinuses, started getting phlegmy in the throat, phlegmy in the chest. I always had to kind of like, I always had to kind of clear my throat, clear my chest. And I was like, something's off. And I'm Hmong, and so we eat this pork and greens, which is part of our traditional dish. And I was like, maybe my mom didn't clean it too well. I don't know. And then I tried the next day, and then same thing happened. And I also could taste the flesh prior to it being cooked. And I grew up, my parents, we owned a slaughterhouse. And so I slaughtered pigs all summer long and every weekend. Um, so I could smell the outside flesh. And eventually I tried every way, pork ribs, smoked ribs, everything. And that started noticing the same signs and symptoms. And I felt tired and lethargic. And so these are signs and symptoms that you're producing phlegm in the body. These fluids are producing phlegm in the body. And so when there's phlegm in the body, then the channels are obstructed. And so then the qi can't flow through you clearly. So first pork went out, and then eventually, um, I love hoppy beer, so I'm a double IPA guy. Quadruple it for me, please. But now, but now my body can't even tolerate it. So I went from like hoppy beer to, I mean, I was like, let's test this thing out. Let's try red wine. Let's try organic wine. Let's try sake. Eventually, I could do only sake, and then that was it. My body said no more. So my body's, as you reach a higher level of frequency within the body. So when you practice qigong, your frequency raises within the body. Your frequency energy raises, so you're vibrating in a higher frequency. And anything that you consume, when I say consume, I mean food you put in your mouth, things you watch, things you listen to, anything you consume that lowers your frequency takes you off this vibration, and you will immediately start to feel off. It could come from your hygiene products, laundry detergent, dishwasher soap, and everything. So all of these things, your body, as you reach a higher frequency, anything that is around you that can contaminate or will lower your frequency, your body will feel it. And so the body is the tuning fork that allows you to see what is in alignment for your highest to keep highest good, to keep your high frequency, and what will bring your frequency down. So I'm uh, very much aware. Almost, it's annoying if you ask me, um, uh, but it is a part of the process, and I can see why people go. I can see why people who achieve high levels of meditation or enlightenment or spiritual consciousness, they go and they live in caves and they live alone and they leave a plant-based diet and they kind of, I can understand that, but that's not the life for me. So first thing is whatever you consume, if it immediately plugs you up, the sinuses, because you get phlegm in your throat, phlegm in your chest, that has to be eliminated. It can be a simple lotion. You can put a little bit of lotion on here, and if you immediately start to feel, yeah, then it's got to go. There's something in that product that your body is not responding to, that is causing obstruction within the flow of the channels, the flow in the body. And when there are obstructions within the body, you lose connection to source, or it dims your connection to source. So as I get to a more higher frequency, there's less and less things, and so it becomes a very, very narrow path. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. I think that's a great. Um, yeah, I like that in terms of sinus or histamine, or, for me, I get it in histamine. I get, I'm very pale. So if I eat something right away, I'll get a malar flush and I'll swell like a butterfly. I go, "Oh, okay, that one's not good for me." Um, I also like this idea of frequency or, alignment. You can feel when you're off alignment very quickly. And,
Yes.
I like to use Wuji sort of as the analogy, like emptiness, whether it's literally standing or just dropping into meditation in that quiet space. It's very easy to hear or see if something's not resonant. And that's what I'm also hearing from what you're saying. In a sense, it's like very obvious. And the path becomes narrow, but if we feel better, then I suppose it's worth it. I'm with you, though. Sometimes it can be a pain in the ass to not eat certain things that I used to really love to
I
eat.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Every time I go to a family event, I have to like bring my own lunch. And so people just look at me weird and they just know, like, oh, Payne doesn't eat that. Like, yeah, it's not that I don't want to. I totally want to. It's just that I know that if I eat it the next 5 days, I'm out. I'm gonna not have the mental clarity I'm gonna have. I'm not gonna be able to look at patients and see from an intuitive sense. It's gonna be fuzzier. And I'm tired. My sleep is off. I'm snoring. Um, I'm noticing that these are the signs and symptoms that my body starts to manifest when I eat something that takes me off frequency, takes me out of alignment.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you also about this. I like the idea personally. I think that it's useful for everyone at some point to consider being a teacherless student, so to speak, right? And there's a name for it in yoga, Satguru. Guru is like he or she who dispels darkness. A teacher, when you're in the dark, you can't see anything. If you get a little distance, you go, "Oh, it's a hand. Oh, it's my hand." We get to see and we get to understand things. Satya is truth, so it's like teacher within. And
Yes.
when I first started Tai Chi, I had a dream about this teacher, and it was Professor Cheng Ching, and he was doing a movement, and all of these little chickens were in the room. And then as he did this movement, Peng, like spelled similar to your name, right? This expansive energy. He did this word off right, and all these chicks aligned, and then they moved outward in a concentric expansion. Like the chicks went and they backed up like from his energy. and he was in this place in New York, and he died in 75. I was young then. And I asked my teacher about it, and they said, yeah, that was the studio. That's what it looked like. I don't think there were ever chickens there. So, you figure that out. That was me being, getting the lesson. But it started to happen more. And when you said this today, it struck a nerve with me. And I think that it's useful for everyone to have this idea, at least at some point, of we have to walk the path on our own, ultimately. Teachers, I think, are wonderful and necessary, and lineages and all of that is good. But it's also quite useful to be your own guide. So if you speak on that a little bit, I think it's really imperative, actually, at some point along the path that we all look inward, turn the lens in. So,
Yes, uh, Qigong leads to the discovery of self. And man, I'm studying myself every day. And man, I have a lot of flaws. And so I'm observing my flaws and I'm not punishing myself like I used to. I used to punish myself for like 6 months or something. That was just ridiculous. Now I'm just observing them. And sometimes when I biff really bad, I'll punish myself for 2 months and reflect on it, and then all right, well, what did I learn? Because the soul is here to learn lessons. And so, well, what did I learn? Okay, how did I biff? What did I do? What did I do wrong? How can I observe and make changes? And I just correct myself and then start making changes so that next time that happens, I do a better job. And so it really is a self-study. The teacher is you. You're constantly looking in the mirror. The observer, the eternal you, when you look in the mirror, this is something that anybody and everybody who's listening to can relate to, right? Go do something wicked, go do something vile, go look in the mirror. You're darker, you're puffier, you're heavier, there's more inflammation, right? Go do something good. Go work out, take cold showers, take a cold plunge, go exercise, go retreat somewhere. You look in the mirror and you're brighter because it's the soul who is looking at the avatar, which is you. And you can see when you're producing light or when you're producing darkness. And so self-study is really observing and being fine-tuned into the body. What is this body teaching me? What kind of codes are written within here? Why do I believe the things that I believe? Why do I think this thing? Do I really believe the things that I think? And so it becomes first is understanding the body through proper nutrition, proper exercise. This is the most basic, this is the more fundamental, easier level, right? Getting nutrition down, getting the self-care down. Next level is the emotional trauma. This is more difficult. These are the things that I try to help guide my students along. And I'm still guiding myself along this process as well. Is we have these life experiences and they're given to us as a soul. We select to have these traumas and these life experiences. We have to understand that there's a gift. As a soul, we came to this planet to, I want to give this gift. Well, and if you want to have this gift, then here's this obstacle that you have to overcome in order to access this gift. And so once you overcome the obstacle, which is within you, then you have access to the gift. And so within us, we will meet these obstacles, and they are seeds of obstacles within us that the soul agreed to have, lessons that the soul agreed to have. And so through self-study, first is knowing the body, getting nutrition right, getting the practices down, versus then knowing the self, know thyself. Then there's the emotions, the trauma, the life experience that you have, why you believe the things you believe in, how those beliefs, traumas, emotions are also causing obstructions within the flow of the body. And so as you begin to practice more, some of these traumas resurface. And then you have to observe, wow, okay, this is my next lesson. This is a doozy. Okay, am I ready to face it yet? And then life will provide opportunities that will challenge those traumas. And lessons come in the form of people. So certain people come into your life to give you lessons, to trigger those traumas. in order for you to present an opportunity for healing to occur. And so this is the next level of healing. So whatever is out there triggering you is triggering something within you that the soul agreed to come here and do healing work on. So I hope I'm going way past Qigong here, but I hope this is helpful to people who are listening.
I hope so too, and I think it will be. It's certainly, it's a deep conversation, and I think it's a very useful one, and people can look at it in their own way. It's like, um, we get hit, we get a bruise over time. That bruise will go slowly, slowly, smaller, 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 until you find out where the first point was that was localized, where you were hit. And if we have an initial wound that follows us sort of constitutionally throughout our whole life, we have to get to that core. And along the way, there's going to be a lot of things, as you say, obstacles that'll point us towards that initial place that can be unwound. And whether that's, I'm with you on this. I believe it's something that is inherent and starts from the very beginning. But I think people can look at this in many different ways and find value from it. Because what I'm hearing is, on a very simple level, even if someone isn't open to this big idea, it's taking responsibility, and that's useful for everyone. And it's very possible that we did choose this whole thing. And it makes sense to me. So I'm certainly with you on this. And I think a lot of people can learn, because it's about responsibility. Do you have the ability to respond? One more question, I think, before we start to wind this down. Time flies. This is something that just popped in my head in relationship to what you were saying. So some people inherit their vagal tone, their neurological tone, um, from their parents, from their mother, from in utero, right? And that's a very early, in some situations, could be a trauma, in my situation, my mother was going through a lot of stress. I won't get into personal stuff, but this was, back in the 60s, and she was going through tons of stress. So when I was born, there was tons of stress, and I was, 3 months early in an incubator, 2 pounds, and my vagal tone was set, fight or flight. So I've been working on that for many years to heal that core initial thing. So along this point that you're talking about, if people have something that they came in with, either very young in utero, soul choice, or very young in childhood, whatever you want to look at it from, whatever lens you look at it, it's still a very deep wound early on. Everything you're saying around diet and exercise and Qigong and all of these stages helps them heal. Is there something in your experience that, if you were to point to one thing that someone could, I know it may be many, but if you could point to one point, one cornerstone, one key to start to unlock this early wound for people, so that they could really find some grounding and anchoring, what comes to you? What would that be? I know that's a unfair question for the end of the session here, because it might
It's
be
okay.
long.
I would, I guess I would say character development.
It's beautiful.
So I would say we as the soul, now take it with a grain of salt. Now, it is my hallucination that we as a soul, before we came here and we decided to imbibe ourselves into these physical bodies, we choose our family, our traumas, based upon our karma, based upon either our karma, both from the karmic merit, which is good, or the karma, which is negative, the actions that we take in previous lives, whatever the case may be. And sometimes now it gets very complex. And sometimes we, as souls, we choose to be born within a specific bloodline in order to heal that bloodline lineage. So now sometimes, all these people who came before, they didn't do the work. They didn't do the work. They created the descendants of our fathers and mothers. But for the sake of categorization. And then we, those who are on the spiritual journey, we say, all right, as a soul, all right, I'll go there and I'll undo these generational curses, character flaws, whatever you want to name them. I will break these cycles. And so sometimes we as a soul, and for some of us, we as a soul, I should say many of us, we sign up to come into this, to fulfill and to break these cycles that have been repeating for generations. And so we inherit, yes, ancestral traumas, and through our own healing, with the practice of Qigong, through our own healing, we heal them because we are very much tied to them based upon genealogy. So the answer is character development. In order to understand why the soul is here, what the soul is doing, we do these practices, and through our own self-healing. And it's typically these challenges, this challenge, should we choose to voluntarily go through it, offers this wonderful gift. And so choosing to embark a treacherous path of suffering and healing, the obstacle allows you to learn and then give that gift back to people. And so for myself, I had no teacher. I had to figure everything out on my own. Every time I tried to find a teacher, I couldn't find a teacher. It just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. Just like the universe was just like, no, 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 no. And I was like, why is no master showing up? Well, it figures out that I was supposed to figure this out on my own. And so what was felt like a curse to me actually became very much so a blessing, because I figured it out on my own. All these things, I picked up pieces from here and there, but through my own self-discovery, I accessed character development, which will help heal yourself, heal others. I'm still working on myself. I still have many flaws. So I'm still on the early stages of character development. So
That's great, man. Well, really nice to hear all of that. It's a narrow, treacherous path you're on, but it's a bright path, and I
very right.
really appreciate that. Through character development, we all can grow and break those ancestral karma. And
Yes.
we as a species killed over 100 million of our own last century. It's imperative now that we evolve, and we're doing this, and this conversation will help a lot of people. So the recap I got from this, and for those of you at home, this is really beautiful, right? So Qigong is a path of energy, and that's a priori. It's a spiritual practice, and it's important to find a teacher that can help you work through that, and most importantly, to find a teacher within, so that you can navigate these pathways. And I really enjoyed our time together. I feel like on some strange level, I found a brother from another mother. It'll be interesting to talk again, and really nice to connect with you, man.
Yes. Likewise.
Let's see, where can people reach out and get in touch with you if they want to learn more or experience your work?
Yeah, I'm going to be launching a class. My next class, I'm going to be launching probably in March. I haven't finalized the date yet, but I'm going to be doing a talk. I'm going to put it on my website somewhere in February. I'm going to be talking about the soul's path to healing. I'm going to talk about why we're here, what we're doing here, and why people aren't healing, and how to shift out of non-healing and into healing. And typically, healing requires a shift in mindset. And I'm saying have to because I'm going to be very firm about it. We have to start looking at our situations from a place of an observer and not a victim. And so when you begin to view your life, I view my life from the sky view. Oh, these are all my traumas. Well, if I view it from the human perspective, then I get lost in victimhood, and I can swirl, and I can repeat the endless Groundhog Day. But when I view it from the sky view, there are many lessons to be had. And the purpose of life is character development. And so through character development, we embark upon a journey of healing. And many people are looking for symptom relief, but healing is quite a treacherous journey and requires gusto, requires grit, requires group. So anyway, Soul's Path to Healing is going to be a talk I'm going to be doing in February. I launched my Qigong class, which helps you amplify the energy within the body, and then you helps clear and cleanse the body. And then you will then begin to, through these discussions, my students, they begin to see the construct that we're all living in and see how the construct is being played and how we are creating the construct. And so when we heal ourselves and we heal ourselves from the victim mindsets, then we change the construct completely. And we begin to fall into alignment, and everything we touch turns into gold. It's a fascinating process.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Is there a website or?
Yep. Just pengrodhenher.com, PENGRODENHER.com. You can find me there. I'm trying to learn to do the YouTube thing. And so I'm going to be posting up videos. I just did a 5-day fast. I vlogged that all. It's horrible, but I learned a lot. Yeah. So these are the things that I do to learn about myself. And when you really push yourself, you really learn, wow, this is what I'm capable of. And I really learn a lot about myself by pushing myself.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, a little bit of tapas. So I want to thank you again. I want to thank the audience for being here. Peng, thanks for listening to the voices in your head, man. And I hope that we all do the same. And thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.